I was 54 the year my father died, though I felt older long before that. I lived with my parents in the same house I grew up in a part of town where the mailboxes leaned and the curtains never changed. My sister Amy lived across the country in Arizona. She had a husband, 3 kids, and a schedule that was always impossible when Mom asked if she'd come visit. Me, I stayed. I didn't marry, didn't have kids. I had Peter, once a quiet man with soft hands and a plan for Colorado, but I asked him to wait when Dad first fell ill. He waited a year. I waited too long. He married a teacher with warm eyes. I sent them a card. Just 3 words. Congratulations, truly. Linda. That was 2 decades ago. Amy called me the dutiful one whenever she did come home, which was every 3 or 4 years, usually with some allergy-friendly baked goods and jet lag too delicate to manage a trip to the grocery store. Mom called me the devoted one. But Amy, she was the one who carried the family forward. I never quite understood what that meant. Maybe it was the children. Maybe it was the husband who wore dress shirts on weekends. Maybe it was the way Mom's eyes softened when Amy entered a room as if presence alone could undo the distance. I was the one who took Dad to appointments, who learned how to measure his insulin when his hands began to tremble. I was the one who woke in the middle of the night when he called out. The one who coaxed him into eating when he'd lost the will for anything but ice chips. I worked part-time at the library down the street, shelving books I'd once dreamed of writing. I had a college degree in English literature and a half-finished manuscript in a drawer I hadn't opened in 8 years. But I stayed. Mom once told me I was lucky. "You're not like Amy," she said over tea one afternoon, folding laundry like it was sacred work. "You don't have the burden of children. So staying here makes sense, doesn't it?" She didn't mean to be cruel. Or maybe she did. It's hard to tell with mothers. Amy called once years ago to ask why I hadn't moved out, hadn't tried something new. I reminded her gently that she had refused to take Dad for even a week when I needed gallbladder surgery. She'd paused, then said, "Well, I have 3 kids, Linda. That's not exactly a vacation." I laughed softly because that was what I'd been taught to do when someone minimized my life. Laugh. Let it pass. Be the stable one. I didn't envy Amy. Not really. But sometimes when I heard the low hum of the washing machine at midnight, or when I cleaned out expired cans from the pantry, I wondered what it might have felt like to be missed, to be chosen, to be the one who was allowed to leave. Instead, I made grocery lists. I adjusted pill schedules. I cleared out Dad's cluttered filing cabinet after his mind began to fail, finding old love letters he'd once written to Mom, written in a language he could no longer speak. At church, people said I was a blessing. "Your mother is so lucky to have you." I smiled. I always smiled. But I don't remember the last time anyone asked how I was doing. By the time Dad's body began to let go, I had been living like this for so long, I forgot there was any other way. And when Peter's name came up in conversation, always from someone else, never me, I simply nodded. That part of me belonged to another Linda, one who had choices. My father passed on a Tuesday. It was raining, not in a cinematic way, just steady and gray and honest. I held his hand until it cooled. His last breath was shallow, almost reluctant. No one else was in the room. Mom had dozed off in her recliner. Amy was on a plane she'd booked late, saying she couldn't get out of a parent-teacher conference. She arrived the next morning still in wedges, pulling a suitcase with wheels that squeaked over the hallway tiles. The funeral was small. Mostly neighbors and church folk who remembered Dad when he could still hold a conversation. Amy gave a eulogy that mentioned how Dad loved apples and hated traffic. I read a passage from Ecclesiastes. No one asked me to, but the pastor gave a slight nod when I stood up. Amy stayed 2 nights. She offered to pay for half the catering, then remembered she had left her wallet in the car. I didn't remind her. On the second evening, I found her booking flights for Saturday morning, explaining she had to get back. Her youngest had a soccer tournament, and Mark couldn't handle the kids on his own for long. I packed Dad's clothes into boxes, took down the old photos in the hallway, wiped the dust from the frames. Mom stayed mostly quiet, sitting at the kitchen table like she was waiting for instructions. 2 weeks later, we received a letter from the attorney, Mr. Keller, asking us to meet at his office to go over the will. It was a Wednesday morning. Amy had flown back in, wearing a muted black dress and too much perfume. Mr. Keller had a tired voice and kind eyes. He opened a thick folder and started reading in the careful, deliberate rhythm lawyers use when they know what's coming will land hard. The entire estate, including the house, the savings, and what was left in Dad's pension, was to go to Amy and her children. He read their names out loud, each one like a stamp on a document I hadn't seen, but could already feel pressing against my skin. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I looked at the brass knob of the office door and thought, that's what this feels like, being on the wrong side of a door no one wants to open. Amy shifted in her seat like the chair had turned cold. Mr. Keller paused, looked at me, then turned to my mother. Mom smiled softly. She placed her hand on mine the way people do when they're about to tell you something cruel in a gentle tone. You don't need anything else, she said. You had time with your father, that was your share. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because it was the only thing I could do to keep from walking out of that room and never coming back. Outside, the air was warm. The sidewalk was cracked and someone had left a plastic pinwheel in a flower bed near the steps. It turned slightly in the breeze, red and yellow and silent. I didn't cry on the way home. I didn't ask questions. I didn't rage or plead. I just walked through the front door, took off my shoes, and folded the sweater I'd worn to the lawyer's office. It smelled faintly of my father's aftershave, though I hadn't worn it near him. That night, I made a list of what I would take with me. It wasn't long. By morning, I had packed a single suitcase, one cardboard box, and the handkerchief Dad gave me when I was 16. It had my name stitched in one corner, Linda, in faded blue thread. He gave it to me after I recited an entire Emily Dickinson poem from memory at a church youth event. For your voice, he'd said, when it gets too full. I left a note on the kitchen table. Mom, I'm going to Oregon. I'll let you know when I'm settled. I never did. I found a town no one had heard of and a room above a bookstore with a window that faced west. The landlord was kind. The floor creaked. The bed was firm. I got a job at the public library, nothing fancy, just shelving books, answering questions about printer jams, helping children find the dinosaur section. No one there knew my story. I was just Linda. Not someone's daughter, not someone's disappointment, not the woman who stayed too long in the wrong house. I didn't take much, no heirlooms, no framed pictures, but I kept the handkerchief tucked in the top drawer of the nightstand. Some nights I unfolded it just to remind myself that something once had been meant for me. I ate alone most evenings. I found peace in the quiet hum of a kettle, the shuffle of paperback spines, the sound of my own footsteps not being followed. When people asked if I had family, I said, not nearby, and changed the subject. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt done. They didn't take my inheritance. They took the illusion that I was ever part of them, and that somehow was worse. The letter came in a plain white envelope, the kind used for bills or reminders from the pharmacy. My name was handwritten, the ink just barely smudged at the edges, postmarked from my hometown. I almost didn't open it. Inside was a short note from Mr. Keller, the attorney who'd read the will. His handwriting was careful, almost apologetic. Linda, I wasn't allowed to say anything earlier. Your mother insisted. But I thought you should know your father had written an earlier will. In it, he left the house to you. It was amended 3 months before he passed. Your mother brought in the changes. I've enclosed a copy for your records. I unfolded the second sheet with fingers that didn't feel like mine. It was a scanned copy, not the original, but I knew the signature. I'd seen my father write that name on birthday cards, tax forms, the inside cover of every book he ever lent from his shelf. The will was dated just over a year before his death. The language was simple, almost tender in its directness. This house is to be left to my daughter Linda. She kept it alive for 17 years. That was it. No embellishment, no long justifications. Just the truth, written once, erased later. I sat down on the edge of the bed. The afternoon light had shifted, casting a long bar of shadow across the room. Outside, someone was mowing a lawn. I heard the low hum of the blades, the rhythmic cough of the motor. A dog barked once, then quieted. I didn't cry. I just stared at the page and let the silence wrap around me. He had tried. At some point, when his voice still held strength, when his memory hadn't yet turned against him, he had tried to name me, to give me something, not just the house, a place, a belonging, and she took it away. I thought of the afternoons I spent cleaning out the garage, the nights I slept in a chair beside his bed, the birthdays I didn't celebrate so he wouldn't be alone. I thought of the day I held his hand as he slipped away, of how I whispered, "It's okay. You can rest now like a promise kept." He had seen all of it, enough to write that sentence. But in the end, it wasn't his handwriting that mattered. I folded the papers back into the envelope and placed them in the drawer with the handkerchief. I didn't need the house, but I needed to know I hadn't imagined it all, and now I knew. I was 28 when I got the scholarship letter. It came in a heavy cream envelope, thick paper gold lettering in the corner. Columbia, full ride, Master's in Literature. I remember holding it in both hands like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. I didn't run to tell anyone. I just stood in the hallway reading it again and again, heart hammering in my chest. For a moment, I saw a different life, brownstone, snow-crowded subway cars, the smell of ink and old books. That night after dinner, I brought the letter to the kitchen. Mom was rinsing plates. Dad was already asleep in his chair. I laid it on the table gently like it deserved reverence. She didn't even look up. "What's that?" she asked, water running. "I got in," I said. "Columbia. They're offering a full scholarship." She turned off the faucet, dried her hands slowly. Then she picked up the envelope, looked it over, and said, "In New York." I nodded. There was a long pause. I could hear the refrigerator humming. The kitchen light buzzed. She sighed. "Linda," she said almost kindly, "if you go, who will take care of your father? You know Amy can't. She has the children. Mark works all the time. They need her." I stood there, gripping the back of a chair. My voice came out small. "I thought, maybe for a year or two." She looked at me, then really looked. "Your sister has a family," she said. "You don't." She folded the letter in half, then again, and again, until it was a small square in her palm. She didn't tear it, not yet. She just held it like something that needed to be handled carefully before it was discarded. I went to my room. The next morning, the letter was gone. I never asked where it went. Years later, when I tried to recall what the letter had said, word for word, I couldn't. I just remembered the feeling like standing at the edge of something vast and beautiful and being told I didn't have permission to jump. It had been nearly 8 months of silence when Amy called again. The number flashed on my screen while I was shelving a new stack of large print mysteries at the library. I let it ring until it stopped. The voicemail came a few minutes later. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. "Linda, it's Mom. She's not well. I don't know how much longer. Call me, please." I didn't. 2 days later, she called again. This time I answered. Amy didn't say hello, just breathed into the line for a moment, then said, "She's forgetting people. Faces. Names. She keeps asking for you." I didn't speak. "She doesn't remember her own granddaughter," Amy added, "but she remembers you. Sometimes she calls you Amy, but mostly she asks, 'Where's Linda?' And then she cries." There was a pause. "My daughter won't go near her anymore. Mark says we should consider a facility, but..." Her voice broke. "I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes. I could picture the kitchen back home, the yellowing wallpaper, the ticking clock above the sink, the echo of a woman who once tore a dream in half like it was napkin paper. She gave her love to someone else. I said, my voice quiet but steady, "Don't call me again. Linda." But I had already hung up. The next day, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was from a former caregiver who had helped with my father years ago. "I visited your mom today. She kept asking for you. She cried when I left. I thought you should know." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I set the phone face down on the counter. That evening I made tea. I placed the cup on the table next to the envelope from Mr. Keller and the folded handkerchief with my name stitched into the corner. I lit a candle not for ceremony, just for light. I didn't feel guilt. Not anymore. What I felt was distance. Not coldness, but clarity. Like stepping out of a fog and realizing you've been breathing secondhand air for decades. There had been a time I would have gone. No matter what. I would have packed a bag, booked the bus, cooked the meals, cleaned the bathroom, and tucked her in at night. I would have done it because that's what I was taught good daughters do. But I wasn't her daughter anymore. Not in the ways that mattered. I was the one who stayed when it was inconvenient. The one who was useful. The one who was invisible until needed. And I was done. I didn't call Amy back. I didn't reply to the message. I turned off my phone and let the quiet settle. The next morning, I woke up to birdsong and no missed calls. It was the first time in years that I didn't start my day with someone else's crisis. I moved again. Different town, different name on the mailbox. I found an apartment above a flower shop, this time small, with slanted ceilings and a view of the river. The rent was low, the neighbors polite. No one asked where I came from. No one called me the good daughter. I changed my number, deleted old contacts. I didn't tell Amy. I didn't leave a forwarding address. I let the past stay behind like furniture too heavy to carry up the stairs. Silence followed. Not the kind that aches, but the kind that settles in your bones like a warm coat after years of damp. No texts, no voicemails beginning with, "We hate to ask." No invitations phrased like obligations. I still went to work, still made tea in the evenings. I bought a plant for the windowsill of fern. It started dying in the first week, but I watered it anyway. We were both learning how to live in new conditions. One evening, I hung the photo of my father on the wall. Just one. He was younger in it, holding a fishing pole, laughing into the sun. I didn't hang it to forgive him. I hung it to remember that someone once saw me, chose me. Even if the choice didn't survive. Some nights I imagined what the house looked like now if the floors had been replaced. If Amy ever sat in the garden we built the summer Dad couldn't stand long enough to mow. I never checked. I didn't owe them that curiosity. For the first time in 54 years, I wasn't waiting for permission to be myself. No one was measuring my worth by my usefulness. I stopped apologizing for being unavailable. I stopped thinking love had to be earned by giving everything up. I still had the handkerchief, still kept it in the drawer beside my bed, but I no longer needed to unfold it to feel known. I no longer needed to hold on to proof. They had rewritten the will. They had carved me out of the story. So I wrote my own. And I chose how it ended. In peace. In quiet. In a space entirely mine. Not because I won, but because I walked away before the ending could be written for me.